Good morning, friends. You are going to hear this here first. I have not heard any discussion yet about the power that Senate. Oh my God. I don't know if this is going to work. This might be our last try. And I'm turning off all features so we won't have conflicts with this browser. So, hoping this works. Okay. Are you here? We have not been hearing on any network, anywhere so far, how much power the Senate Democrats actually have to stop Donald Trump's aggressive and, I believe, dangerous agenda. Specifically, over the weekend, while Donald Trump was crowing about passing this budget bill, right? We, of course, felt defeated, understanding that not only was this legislation going to, not only was this legislation going to hurt us, it was going to, sorry, I'm getting messages from Michael telling me he can see me, he can't. So I'm just trying to stay on track here. With our tech difficulties. This is really important, guys. Focus on the message, not the tech. Okay, this legislation is terrible, but it does not go into effect on its own. The budget process is step one. Okay, so this legislation that was passed through this reconciliation process, where they only needed a simple majority in the House and the Senate to jam this bill through on partisan grounds. This legislation doesn't actually kick in until Congress gets through what's called the appropriations process. This may seem like in the weeds, but you are going to love these weeds. When I start talking about this, this is going to sound familiar to you. So let me be as clear as I can. That budget bill is supposed to be passed for the, a budget bill that is passed that you would think goes into effect when the 2026 year begins. Well, the 2026 year for the government starts October 1st. But again, his bill does not go into effect, not the new spending, or not the new cuts, but we'll get to that in a moment, until October 1st. Why do I keep repeating myself? Well, because there is an opportunity for Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate to say no effing way to the worst parts of this bill. Okay, because this is why. And I'm gonna explain this to you, and I'm gonna share right now a link in the chat. Here is a link to something from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, and it's about government shutdowns. If Congress does not go through all of the appropriation committees, I think there are 12 of them, and pass the appropriations for a coming year, the government shuts down effective October 1. That is why every year you hear about these so-called continuing resolutions, right? Very often, typically a continuing resolution is passed. You still need 60 votes in the Senate to get through the debate to the up and down vote, right? The continuing resolution is passed to fund the budget for a period of time. And often in the continuing resolution, we call it a must-pass budget bill, they throw all kinds of goodies that they want. The party in power, and sometimes the party not in power, because like us, we have some leverage, we get some things in there. You might remember, guys, that the last time this happened was in March of this year, a continuing resolution. And this continuing resolution that was passed in March, there was a big brouhaha because some people said to Chuck Schumer, "What are you doing? Why don't you hold out and use this as leverage and refuse to fund Donald Trump's government because we are hearing about the huge cuts he wants to make in the future to government programs like Social Security, we were worried about, and the like. Chuck, and also people were saying Donald Trump is acting like an authoritarian. He had already issued on January 20th. So that's months before March. He'd already issued these executive orders to end birthright citizenship and so on. And so you might remember that Chuck Schumer took some heat because Democrats voted for the continuing resolution. There were people who thought he should have held out. So I just dropped in the chat what the process is, but I want to instead first, before we get to that, tell you about this. So let me remind you, and I'm going to share a Chuck Schumer video in a second. To avert the last government shutdown in March of this year, there were 62 senators who supported the continuing resolution and 38 who opposed. The opposition was entirely Democratic, other than, as you know, Bernie Sanders caucuses with the Democrats, but he is not. He's an independent. And then Rand Paul. You see that little red square. On the other side, on the left, the supporters, there were 62. And you can see among the supporters, there was Chuck Schumer and 9 Democrats. Okay, that's what we saw. Now, what else do we know? What we know is here are the Democrats who supported the continuing resolution. We have Masto, Durbin, Fetterman, shouldn't be a surprise, Gillibrand. Oh yes, Gillibrand, the senator from New York who sold us out with that really shitty crypto bill. Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire, Angus King. Of course, he caucuses with he's an independent, and sometimes he's caucuses with Dems. Usually he does, I think. Yeah, he counts. Gary Peters of Michigan, Brian Schatz, Schumer, and Shaheen. And then the rest were Republicans. Okay, so a little more on this. Government shutdowns are no good thing. And I'm gonna share the Schumer discussion with Chris Hayes and talk to you in a second about that. But before I do, I want to be clear. There is no question at all, from a legal perspective, as far as I can see, whether or not the Democrats have the power to refuse to fund this budget. Of course they can. It's not the question of can. It's a question of should. Should the Senate Democrats put their foot down about things like, I don't know, we will not fund this government unless there is a declaration from the Department of Homeland Security and the president that ICE agents cannot be masked and that they must have their numbers. What if we say no more concentration camps? What if we say no more taking people off the street unless they have an actual violent criminal record? What if? There are so many what ifs that could be demanded to be included in the CR before funding the budget. That could happen. So it's not a question of can they use their leverage. The question is, should they? How should they use the leverage? And what is the end game? How long do they hold out? What has this been tabletopped in terms of the logical things that could happen next? How long would we go? How dangerous would it be for the public for a shutdown? So first, I want to share with you Chuck Schumer talking about this with Chris Hayes in March after voting to fund Donald Trump.
Difference to me between 2017 and now, and I've been at this desk for both of us. It's different. It is a full-fledged assault on the constitutional order that has not been seen again.
Well, that's
certainly in my life.
That is true.
But the question then becomes...
But that's not the spending part.
That isn't. But then the question becomes, what is the role of the minority in resisting that? That's distinct from, we're going to beat them on healthcare, we're going to beat them on spending Medicaid.
Look, if our democracy is at risk...
It is at risk.
It is certainly at risk.
Well, do you believe it is?
But if...
I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you believe it's at risk?
Trump doesn't obey the Supreme Court, which may happen, you led up to it here, then we will have two courts. We will have the federal courts, which hopefully John Roberts will stand up and make it happen. But we'll have the court of public opinion. And if that happens, as you pointed out, we have had rule of law since the Magna Carta. Okay? And if that happens and the rule of law goes by the wayside, I believe that there will be very, very, there will be immediate and strong reaction from one end of the country to the other in ways that we have never seen. And that's what will happen. And it's not just up to us. The people will have to rise up, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, not just, people, everybody. But our democracy will be at stake then. And if the people make their voices heard and are strong and stand up and we join them, I believe we can try to beat that back. We can beat that back. But it's on that one. If democracy is at risk, that's a little different than what we're talking about now. Even a shutdown, as horrible as it is, we'll all have to stand up and fight back in every way.
I think actually this is useful because I do think, like, just in a genuine sort of good faith way, that there's a lot of people, and I think I probably count myself among them, who think that that's where we are right now. Well, that the plan being deployed.
Okay. Just for people tuning in now, to make clear, this was an interview with Chuck Schumer in March. In March. Let's continue to listen to what Chris Hayes said here. Let's go.
Right now.
You may be right. I don't think so. We're there. I think
we're not there yet.
Well, I think we're getting there, and we have to be really vigilant. I just had a meeting today with the Judiciary Committee to decide how we're working through this as it goes further. It hasn't been up to the Supreme Court yet, which would be the classic.
Okay, number one. What if the Supreme Court is in the tank with Donald Trump? Then are you fine, Chuck? There are a lot of problems with what he said, but we are obviously in an authoritarian regime. We clearly need to put the brakes on the most dangerous thing Donald Trump is, dangerous things that he is doing and that the Congress funded. And the fact that the majority at the Supreme Court is willing on a technicality not to address the fact that his, for example, birthright citizenship ban, executive order, they're not willing to address it on the merits. And they're going to wait for that thing to play out because because they just only wanted to deal with the nationwide injunction issue. Chuck, wake up. What if? Because this president installed those justices who we know lied in their confirmation hearing us about things like Roe v. Wade. Okay, what Chuck also said is, I think if the president defies the U.S. Supreme Court, there'll be a groundswell. By the way, we had a massive No Kings rally, right? The numbers are not clear to me because different people are throwing out different numbers, but the things I've seen from Indivisible, what was it, you guys? You can correct me, over 5 or 6 or 8 million people. We only have our voices and our bodies. And by the way, Senator Schumer, a lot of people cannot go into the streets because they're afraid of being arrested. Not because they're here unlawfully, not because maybe they're also just on a green card, yet because even if they are U.S. citizens, if they are brown, they are being rounded up and disappeared, as well as people with green cards, as well as people with minor misdemeanors like a traffic ticket, being disappeared off the streets, put in prisons. And now we're finding out if you are someone who has a green card or any kind of protected status, that can be just stripped away. You can be not just, you can be thrown into one of these concentration camps, or even so, you can be sent to a third country like South Sudan. So, Chuck, excuse me, we have done our part. Now, again, my question is, I am not a political strategist. I don't know if Schumer should use the CR to negotiate. It's worked before. But I don't know if that has been played out. But let me tell you, I think that should be on the table. Now, I'm going to share this with you real quick, and I'm going to get to some other videos here, because I think you need to see. It's the link that I dropped in the chat. And I'm going to share this screen. Here we go. So this is a page about the budget process and about shutdowns. Okay. And so everything you should know about government shutdowns. And it happens, we've had government shutdowns because every year, you can see this, Congress, I think you're looking at the same thing every year. Congress must pass and the president must sign budget legislation, right? And there has to be appropriation bills from each appropriation committee. This is after the budget bill. And this has to be done by 60, you need 60 votes for this. Now, very often what happens is if you cannot get that vote, there'll be a shutdown. So we know some services can be shut down. Social Security and Medicare checks, they will still be sent out. But verification to get a new card, it might be a problem. Well, that's a problem already now. Plus, in the 1995 to 96 shutdown under Clinton, we know that 10,000 applicants were temporarily turned away for Medicare. But that was temporary, right? Other things like EPA food inspection, national parks were shut down. That's happening now. Also, sometimes there was problems with air travel because TS agents would not work without pay. So we can see it can be very disruptive, right? Now, this was, just to be clear, some programs will continue, right? So I'm telling you some of the downsides. Sometimes there was special authority. We're seeing this in the 2018 to 2019 shutdown to allow funding when it allows funding for SNAP benefits, right? That is Special Nutritional Assistance Plan. Those are the food stamps, right? And how many times has the government shut down? So since we've gone through this process, this so-called modern budget process, there have been 20 funding gaps. Now, sometimes they're very short, sometimes it could be less than a day and so on, right? So when it's a few hours, that's not anything that results in federal employees being furloughed. Okay. So since 1981, there have been 10 funding gaps of 3 days or fewer over the weekend, so only minimal shutdown. So let's look at the actual serious shutdowns. There have only been 4 in that time frame. The first 2 were when Bill Clinton was president, and he and the Republican Congress were not able to agree on spending levels. There were 2 shutdowns for a total of 26 days. The third was in 2013. This was when President Obama was president, when Barack Obama was president, and the House and Senate were fighting over the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, right? And that was a 16-day shutdown. And the fourth was in 2018 to 2019. And that was it was only a partial shutdown, right? And that was during the Trump administration. And that was because only 5 of the 12 appropriations had been enacted. And so there was a dispute over border funding. And that was the longest shutdown that lasted 35 days. Okay, so I'm just letting you know, shutdowns happen. I'm not saying it's all good. I'm just saying this could happen. And this should be on the table. And it is July. And the Senate Democrats should be thinking about a plan for shutdown or for responding to the public when we say, why did you fund this budget? Like, what can they do to stop Trump? So let's talk now about the stuff that's in the bill that's really quite terrible. So I'm gonna share with you several interviews with Dana Bash or Donna Bash. I always say her name wrong. Here is with the governor of Kentucky, Democrat Andy Beshear, on some things that he hates about the bill. Let's go.
This law adds work requirements for Medicaid on those who are able-bodied adults. Kentucky Republican Congressman Hal Rogers says adding these requirements, quote, protects the longevity of Medicaid benefits for our most vulnerable population and adds integrity and strength to Medicaid and SNAP assistance. One of the first acts of as governor, yours, was to end Medicaid work requirements in Kentucky. Why shouldn't people who can work?
Well, we want everybody that can work to work. And right now in Kentucky, we have the most people working, the most jobs filled, and the largest workforce in our history. And that is with our current Medicaid structure. That's because these work requirements really aren't about getting people back to work. They are about increasing the paperwork on everybody. That's the senior, because 70% of our long-term care costs are covered by Medicaid. And that's children as well, with half of Kentucky's kids covered by Medicaid. These work requirements aren't just for specific people. Everybody else has to check all the boxes saying they're not able-bodied. And what happens is when somebody misses that one box, they are kicked off for 6 months or more.
Governor.
Meaning families have to take that parent or grandparent in. It means they have to cover all those other costs. All this is more red tape meant to kick people who should get Medicaid off of Medicaid.
Governor, I just asked that very question to the Treasury Secretary about the increase in red tape, and his response is Democrats think poor people are stupid.
It's amazing.
Oh my God, how offensive. I guess Republicans think rich people and businesses are stupid because they're always trying to cut the red tape for them. Now, something else to say. Let's switch over to Besant, blaming Democrats for something that happened in 2020 while Donald Trump is president. And Dana Bash doesn't even correct him. Let's go.
Through the red tape and not create more red tape. But I do want to move on because
no. But we've also wanted to put in work requirements, which somehow that was very popular under Bill Clinton, was popular under President Obama, and this Democratic Party blew out the deficit in 2020, and they never.
This Democratic Party blew out the deficit in 2020. Really? Shocking. Shocking. That is when I think Donald Trump was president, as we said.
Never want to bring it back, but work requirements even poll well with the median Democratic voter, maybe not the fringe.
Okay, so this is the way that game is being played. Now, of course, there are even worse aspects of this legislation. Let me just share with you Dean Obadala, our friend from the show who has his daily radio program on Sirius XM. Here he is on with Ali Velshi this weekend talking about some of the most dangerous behavior that will be supercharged and superfunded by this new budget bill, which I'm hoping doesn't get appropriated, that we hold out and refuse to fund the government or refuse to appropriate funds for this new dangerous, unlawful, cruel, and inhumane effort for mass deportation.
I want people to know the memo from the Department of Justice doesn't talk about naturalization like as a laundry list. The words are, and I'm reading from it, prioritizing denaturalization, prioritizing. This is a priority of this administration to denaturalize people. And you went through some of the reasons in that memo, Ali. To me, that catch-all is concerning, but one that's even more concerning, they write in the memo, if you are a potential danger to national security, potential, not concrete, not imminent, anyone is a potential danger to national security if you take it out and go, well, they're saying this now, but who knows where they're going to be. This administration is taking a page from Putin, where they have a law, if you criticize the war in Russia, you lose your citizenship. In Hungary, they just literally passed one in the last month to do the same thing Trump is doing now. We have it on the books. They want to expand it. They've done this in Cuba and Venezuela. It is a tool of autocrats. The goal is to punish a few people in a big picture spectacle and call self-censorship of others. It's about cracking down on dissent. That's all it's about.
So that is this other topic, right? Now that Donald Trump thinks he's won because the Supreme Court refuses to affirm all the courts below, saying the birthright citizenship is ingrained in the Constitution and that he can't take it away, right? The Supreme Court could have addressed that, but they decided not to, right? All the courts below have said what Donald Trump is doing is unconstitutional or unlawful under statutes. And now he's moving on to try to denaturalize, take away citizenship from people to silence them, right? So why would we be funding this government? Now, guys, I need to pivot to a few other things that are happening right now. The very tragic floods in Texas, where we have, I think it's over 50 or 60 people have lost their lives, many children still missing from a summer camp. And clearly, this falls right squarely on Donald Trump's desk. And yet he has very little to say about it. Let's go.
Democrats are claiming your federal cuts for the deaths over in Texas.
She said Democrats are blaming your federal cuts for the deaths in Texas. He's acting like he can't hear. You see Lutnick on his left. You see Donald there.
Are you still planning to phase out FEMA?
So now asked another question. Are you still planning to phase out FEMA?
Well, FEMA is something we can talk about later. But right now they're busy working, so we'll leave it at that. Go ahead.
Really? FEMA is something we can talk about later, but they're busy working. That's the best this guy has. Okay, so let's talk about that. I think you've probably heard over the weekend as we try to uncover what went wrong. It seems like the National Weather Service, the meteorologists themselves, did an excellent job in forecasting the flash flooding, and there were many hours for people to act who were in that zone of danger. And that the reason why they didn't was lack of communication between the offices, between not FEMA now, we're talking about National Weather Service. The National Weather Service, not the meteorologists who forecast, but the local meteorologists who the offices nearby, like in San Antonio, who are supposed to connect up with the local governments. The reason why there was some either lack of handoff or not dire enough communication is because of DOJ and Donald Trump. The pressure to force people into taking buyouts resulted in the most important person in that office leaving and not being replaced. And there were news articles and local television programs when he left about the danger, and no one did anything. And so I want to share that video with you now. Here we go. I think this is Joaquin Castro from Texas.
Talking about the federal government and even the local government, 2 Texas National Weather Service offices involved in forecasting and warning about flooding on the Guadalupe River are missing some key staff members. A director of the NWS union told CNN that the Austin San Antonio office is missing a warning coordination meteorologist due to the Trump administration's buyouts. Do you have any indication whether those or other cuts helped play a role in the fact that the people in the flood zone were not prepared and certainly not evacuated?
I can't say that conclusively, but I do think that it should be, and I don't think it's helpful to have missing key personnel from the National Weather Service not in place to help prevent these tragedies. And, when I say that we ought to do everything possible to help prevent a tragedy like again, that's part of what I mean. That's why there's an incredible value to the National Weather Service, is because, on most days, obviously, you're not going to have a tragedy like this. But when you have flash flooding, there is a risk that you won't have the personnel to do that analysis, do the predictions in the best way, and it could lead to tragedy. So I don't want to sit here and say conclusively that that was the case, but I do think that it should be investigated, and not having enough personnel is never helpful.
I'm hoping nothing like this happens again. And I'm hoping that for those of us who live in communities with rivers that frequently flood, which in this case, apparently this river was a regular flood, or if you live nearby, this would be the time to check in with your local, whether it's a city or county government, to see what kind of warning systems you have in place, right? Some towns apparently have sirens outside that will signal that there is going to be a flood and so on. Some folks in the chat have asked, what about those phone alerts? Well, the problem in this case, if you think about it, is a lot of the people there's some people camping down by the river. They're not from the area. When you go camping, you often go off grid. And if you sign up for alerts, they're not local. Kids who go to summer camp are not using their phones. So any kinds of alerts they would have on them wouldn't go off, and also wouldn't be from that area, right? I think there needs to be, and it's utterly tragic from what I have read. The two owners of this camp have died. This is a camp that's been around for 100 years. And I'm hoping that the families there whose children have been returned to them can get them the help they're going to need with all the survivor's guilt and losing their friends. And of course, it's appropriate to pray for the families if prayer is what you want, but prayer is not the answer that the government should be, like Mike Johnson, offering up right now. The answer should be an investigation so these families and the rest of us understand what went wrong here, because we want to prevent it in the future, whether that is with spending money, federal government money, to help small rural areas set up and pay for these warning systems as climate change continues to wreak havoc, right? Or paying camps and so on like this, which has apparently rebuilt before after a flood, to build higher up away from riverbanks, right? There can be all kinds of things we can do, but we cannot suggest changes unless we understand the causes. Now, I got something more for you. The show is about law, money, and snark. And there's something I saw, an AP story that I saw that Rachel Maddow had posted on her feed. So I dug into it. So this is a story that came up just over this weekend. And it's about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And basically, my friends, the headline here is that the current leadership of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has shafted active duty service members who were going to be able to receive over, I think it was something close to $95 million in unlawful overdraft fees that they were charged by the Navy Federal Credit Union. So this is a case brought by that agency that was the brainchild of Elizabeth Warren when she was merely a law professor. And when she finally after the agency was stood up, she later became a senator. But the point I have here is that I have always found, as someone who watched the enactment of Dodd-Frank, the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act that was enacted in 2010. I was very close to that legislative process, having watched that and observed aspects of that. I have always said the crown jewel in that legislation was the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And what has happened, and that is because, by the way, until this term by Donald Trump, when he replaced Rohit Chopra, who is the director. The CFPB, the Consumer Bureau, had returned $21 billion to consumers who were cheated by financial institutions. So why? What happened here? Like, why in the world did this happen and what happened? So this is an article in the AP. Probably Rachel will talk about it tonight. I don't know. But this is a story, let me just tell you, that the Navy Federal Credit Union will no longer have to refund $80 million to service men and women for illegally charging them overdraft fees in their accounts because the CFPB moved to dismiss this case. What the hell? And why did this happen? Take a look. In February, Elon Musk wrote CFPB RIP with a grave site. And someone said, what does this agency even do? It does nothing. And then Elon responded, they do above zero good things, but they still need to go. Why did they need to go, guys? They didn't need to go because Elon Musk or Donald Trump decided. This is Wall Street. These are small, medium, and large banks who have been trying to get rid of this agency because it's effective. They want it to work for them and not the American people. And you're never going to flip and believe. When I tell you, hold your hats, don't put down your coffee so you don't spit it out. Do you want to know who the current acting director of the CFPB is? I think you do. Let me show you. Holy hell. It is Russ Vought, the man who drafted, who was the architect of the Project 2025. So he was put in place, right? He is not only Office of Management Budget Director, but he's also acting director of the CFPB. That happened February 7th. And look, what happened on that same day? Elon Musk said he was there to kill it. Now, let me show you the numbers. Shockingly, the CFPB's website is still up. And I was able to find this because they haven't taken it down yet. So there's a whole bunch of things that the CFPB has claimed, last updated in December, that their accomplishments are. So let's look at this. These are the top two. $21 billion plus. This is the amount of monetary compensation, principal reductions like on mortgages, canceled debts, and other consumer relief resulting from CFPB enforcement and supervisory work. So $19 billion from enforcing the law, right? And that is since it was stood up. So that legislation was passed in 2010. The agency came into existence in 2011, right? So in about a dozen years, they were able to give back $19 billion to consumers for enforcing the law and $1.7 billion for supervising and before it was an enforcement. What about this? 205 million is the estimated number of consumers or consumer accounts eligible to receive relief from their work. 205 million, guys. That is an incredible number when you consider how many people are, what do you have, 380 million people in the United States? Okay, so what else? There is Russ Vought. And here's the good guy, lovely person, Rohit Chopra. He was fired by Donald Trump. He held out for a while. Here's the article from when he was fired in February. Under Chopra, the Consumer Protection Agency took aggressive action against banks, often putting him at odds with the financial industry. Days before Trump took office last month, the CFPB sued Capital One for allegedly cheating customers out of billions in interest on consumer savings accounts. Chopra cracked down on junk fees and signaled support for a proposal that would cap credit card interest rates, something Trump said he openly supported. So Chopra actually outlasted other Biden officials, and this was, according to Axios, a source of mystery among big bank interest groups. And then here the article says Elon Musk openly pushed for the Bureau to be abolished, posting on X, delete CFPB, right? He had said that in November, right? Then in February, he had said RIP. And also, here we go. Here's the kicker. Eliminating the CFPB was also one of the recommendations of Project 2025. Got it. Okay, guys. Sorry I'm running a bit over. I was trying to keep this in a half hour, but we had tech difficulties. I got one more thing for you before I get to Crazy Town. So I don't know if you've been following the recent news about the so-called Jeff Epstein client list. And it has been, so I think I want to back up and say, you know who Jeffrey Epstein is. He's someone who died in prison. Some people believe he committed suicide. Other people believe he was killed. Those who believe he committed suicide, some of them think that he was able to do so because there was not enough supervision on his jail cell. We know that he was indicted in connection with child trafficking and child sex abuse and rape, etc. We also know that his colleague, Ghislaine Maxwell, is in prison, right? And so one of the big things both Elon Musk was hounding Donald Trump with when he was angry at him, and the Trump White House was touting recently, was that there was this so-called client list that they were going to release to the public. And whether it was a client list or maybe names in Epstein's phone book or something else that they had uncovered, who knows? But let me make clear to you that we did have Pam Bondi, after she was confirmed as Attorney General. This is what she said at that time.
DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agents.
Okay, so she said that she had the Jeff Epstein client list on her desk. That's what she said then. And now all of a sudden, it's really weird. And by the way, let me just add a little more to this. We also have, this was in February, we had all these conspiracy theorists holding these things that were like mocked up folders claiming that they contained Epstein's client list. Well, now we're hearing, guys, that I'm sure you saw this. There is no client list. And Pam Bondi went on television and said there's no client list and we are not going to talk about it any further. And Epstein wasn't blackmailing anyone. Now, guys, if there are no clients, then how is Ghislaine Maxwell in prison? I don't think that's possible. Now, maybe technically speaking, there's not one list, but there are receipts. There are names of underage girls with people's names and photos. I don't know what there is, but whatever there is, it's not nothing. And Bondi was saying it was on her desk, poof, and now it has disappeared. Okay, guys, it is now time for Crazy Town. Let's do it. I think that you are going to absolutely love this. Look up close. Look up close. If you think, well, before you do, I'm going to pop in here. A lot of us sometimes worry that AI may be taking over, right? I don't worry about that. I'm one of these people who thinks AI is a supplement and it's a good learning tool. You can show students how it messes up on questions and how they can then explain why AI is wrong. That's helpful. But at any rate, AI is really funny because this just came up online. This is someone posted this, the most popular food of each state from voting. I think this account is probably a robot, and this is a picture of the United States. I am dying. And let's take a look. My favorite here, if you know your states, is Cab Bake is up in, I think that is New York State. And the favorite dishes, the favorite food from California is both shrimp cocktail and tato. I have no idea what Chiswick dip is, or deep D pizza. I am really fond of looking at Louisiana and seeing that one of their dishes is carback. And I'm wondering if carback is a specialty from Mardi Gras. Another good thing that's really hard to get is shrimp bow grits. And I have no idea what polchi is. I'm glad that Illinois has cheese. I'm not sure what South Dakota chislic is. But anyway, guys, that's pretty crazy. And with that, I bid you adieu. Hopefully, if StreamYard doesn't have this all fixed, I will go to a different studio area so you don't have to look at a green screen. But thank you for putting up with me today. Mwah, and I will see you bright and early at 9 tomorrow morning.
Hello, prison mates. It's the Gen Taub Show, where welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There is hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Gen Taub Show.